The marketplace on Frontier Station buzzed with activity like it did every evening. Hundreds of beings from dozens of worlds moved through the crowded aisles, examining goods from across the galaxy. The air smelled of exotic spices, ozone from energy weapons, and the musk of living creatures held in cages. Jake wiped grease from his hands as he walked through the market. His shift at the repair bay had run long, and his back ached from crawling through tight engine spaces all day. He was 35 years old, and sometimes he felt every year of it. Still, he liked browsing the market. It reminded him that the galaxy was bigger than busted fuel lines and cracked hull plating. He passed stalls selling crystalline plants that hummed when touched, weapons that could punch through ship armor, and fabrics that changed color with the wearer's mood. Then he reached the section he usually avoided, the exotic creature dealers. Glass enclosures lined both sides of the narrow aisle. Inside them, rare animals from dangerous worlds waited for buyers. Most were destined to become pets for wealthy collectors or attractions in private zoos. Jake had always found it depressing. He was about to turn back when he saw her. The dragon hatchling sat in a cage barely large enough for her body. Her scales, which should have gleamed like polished metal, looked dull and lifeless. Her wings were folded tight against her sides and her head hung low. She was small for a dragon, no bigger than a house cat, and something about her looked wrong. One wing sat slightly higher than the other. Jake stopped walking. He had seen sad things before, but something about this creature grabbed his heart and squeezed. "You interested in the dragon?" a voice asked. Jake turned to see the stall owner, unnamed. The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, and his purple skin rippled with what might have been amusement. "I can make you a good deal." "How long has she been here?" Jake asked. 3 months, said, waving a tentacle dismissively. "Nobody wants her, too small. Scales are not bright, and look at those wings. Asymmetrical. No serious collector would buy such a flawed specimen." Jake crouched down to look at the hatchling more closely. She raised her head slightly, and their eyes met. Hers were golden, shot through with flecks of red, and they held an intelligence that made his breath catch. Then he heard it, a voice inside his mind, so quiet he almost missed it. "Nobody wants me." Jake jerked back in surprise. Did she just? "Ah, so she chose you for contact," said, his tone shifting to something like respect. "Dragons are telepathic. They can speak mind to mind, but they rarely bother with other species. Interesting that she reached out to a human." Jake touched the glass. The hatchling pressed her snout against it from the other side. "Why doesn't anyone want her?" Jake asked. Shrugged, a gesture he had learned from dealing with humans. "Dragons are status symbols. The wealthy buy them to show off. They want big dragons, perfect dragons, dragons with scales that shine like stars. This one," he gestured at the hatchling. "She is a disappointment. Small, flawed, and her coloring is all wrong. She should be bright crimson. Instead, she is this muddy red-brown." "Maybe she's just sick," Jake said. "Maybe she needs proper care." "Maybe," agreed. "But dragons are expensive to feed, expensive to house, and bonding with them takes time. Why spend resources on a defective one when you could wait for a perfect specimen?" The hatchling's voice came again, weaker this time. "Please, it hurts." "What hurts?" Jake asked aloud, not caring that was watching him talk to the creature. "The bond," the hatchling whispered in his mind. "When we reach out and are rejected, it hurts. I have reached out so many times. Everyone turns away." Jake felt something crack inside his chest. He had been alone enough times to know what rejection felt like. To imagine feeling it over and over while trapped in a cage, unable to escape. "How much?" he asked. The eyes all widened. "You want to buy her?" "How much?" Named a price that was less than a tenth of what a healthy dragon cost. It would still eat into Jake's savings, but he had the money. "I should warn you," said. "Humans have never successfully raised a dragon. They are complex creatures. They need special foods, specific minerals, and constant telepathic contact. Without proper bonding, a hatchling will die within months. I'll figure it out, Jake said. Your funeral, said cheerfully. He opened the cage. The hatchling stumbled out on unsteady legs. She was even smaller outside the cage, and Jake could see her ribs through her scales. How long had they been feeding her? He paid with his credit chip, and they handed him a data pad with basic care instructions. Good luck, human. You will need it. Jake carefully picked up the hatchling. She weighed almost nothing. He wrapped her in his work jacket to keep her warm and started back through the marketplace. What's your name? The small voice asked in his mind. Jake, what's yours? I do not have one. Nobody wanted me long enough to name me. Jake felt that crack in his chest split wider. How about Ember? Like a small fire that could grow big if given the chance. The hatchling was quiet for a moment. Then, Ember, yes, I like that. As they walked back to his workshop, Jake became aware of other beings watching them. A security officer shook her head. A group of merchants pointed and laughed. A human woman running a supply depot waved at him with a concerned expression. Jake ignored them all. He focused on the small weight in his arms and the tentative warmth of the mind touching his. His workshop was in the industrial section of the station, a cramped space filled with tools, spare parts, and half-repaired machinery. It smelled like oil and hot metal, and it was not much to look at, but it was home. He cleared a space in the corner and set down some blankets he used for catching oil drips. They would have to do until he could build something better. He placed Ember gently on the blankets. She curled into a tight ball, her tail wrapped around herself. You will not leave me, she asked. I won't leave you, Jake promised. They all say that at first, Ember whispered. Then they see what I am. Broken, wrong, not worth the trouble. Jake sat down beside her. His knees popped and his back protested, but he stayed there anyway. Listen to me, Ember. I fix things for a living. I fix ships that other mechanics say are hopeless. I fix engines that should be scrap. You know what I've learned. Ember raised her head slightly. The things that look broken are usually just waiting for someone to see them differently. You're not wrong. You're just waiting to become what you're meant to be. Ember's golden eyes studied him. Why? Why do you care? Jake thought about that. Because someone should. Because you asked for help and I heard you. Because maybe we're both a little bit broken and maybe we can figure out how to be less broken together. For the first time, Ember's mind voice held something besides pain. It held a tiny spark of something that might, eventually, become hope. Thank you, Jake, she said. He reached out slowly and touched her head. Her scales were cool and rough under his fingers. Get some rest, Ember. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to make you better. As the station's artificial night cycle began and the lights dimmed, Jake sat beside the small dragon and wondered what he had just gotten himself into. He had no idea how to raise a dragon. He barely knew how to take care of himself most days. But when he looked at Ember, curled on her blanket with her eyes finally closed in something like peaceful sleep, he knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes the most important decisions were not the logical ones. Sometimes you just had to listen to that voice that said someone needed you, and you had to answer. Jake pulled another blanket over himself and leaned against the wall. Tomorrow would bring challenges. Tonight, he would keep watch over the small life he had promised to protect. In her sleep, Ember's wings twitched, and a tiny curl of smoke rose from her nostrils. She was dreaming, and for the first time in 3 months, her dreams were not nightmares. Jake woke with a stiff neck and his back screaming in protest. Sleeping against a wall was not kind to a body his age. Pale artificial sunlight filtered through the workshop's small window. Station morning had arrived. He looked at the blanket pile where Ember had slept. It was empty. His heart jumped into his throat. Ember. A soft scraping sound came from behind a stack of engine parts. He found her there, wedged into the smallest space possible, her body trembling. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "It's just me." Loud noise, her voice whispered in his mind. The station waking up, too many sounds. Jake realized she was right. The station's ventilation had kicked to full power. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Somewhere, a cargo loader rumbled past. Normal sounds that he had stopped noticing years ago, but to someone who had spent 3 months in a quiet cage, it must be overwhelming. "I know it's scary," he said, "but nothing here will hurt you, I promise." He did not try to pull her out. Instead, he went to his small food storage unit and tried to remember what the care instructions said. Dragons needed protein, lots of it, and certain minerals. He had protein rations meant for humans, some dried meat strips and not much else. It would have to do until he could get proper supplies. He placed a few pieces of meat near Ember's hiding spot and backed away. "When you're ready," he said. Then he started his morning routine, moving slowly and calmly. He made coffee. He checked his messages. He had 3 new repair jobs waiting. Bills needed paying after all, even with a dragon to care for. An hour passed before Ember emerged. She crept toward the food, sniffed it suspiciously, and took a tiny bite. Then another. Soon she was eating properly, and Jake felt relief wash over him. "Good?" he asked. "Yes, thank you." His first customer arrived at mid-morning. A trader needed a thruster realignment. Simple work. But when the insect-like alien entered the workshop, Ember vanished back into her hiding spot so fast Jake barely saw her move. The Santeni twitched. "I smell dragon. You keep dangerous creature here." "She's not dangerous," Jake said firmly. "She's just scared." The clicked his mandibles doubtfully but said nothing more. Jake finished the job quickly, wanting his workspace back to normal for Ember's sake. After the customer left, Jake crouched near Ember's hiding spot. "I know having strangers here is hard, but I have to work. I need to pay for food and rent. Can you try to be brave?" Ember's golden eyes peered at him from the shadows. "I will try." Over the next few days, they developed a routine. Jake worked during the day while Ember watched from whatever spot she had chosen. Sometimes she hid. Sometimes she perched on a high shelf. Always, she watched him with those intelligent eyes. He started talking to her while he worked, explaining what he was doing. "See this fuel converter. The plasma flow is blocked. If I don't clear it, the whole engine could overheat and explode. So I need to carefully remove this panel without damaging the seals." Ember listened. Her mind voice rarely spoke, but Jake could feel her presence, curious and attentive. On the 4th day, something changed. Jake was working late, trying to repair a particularly stubborn power coupling. The component was old, the parts were corroded, and his patience was running thin. When he finally got the coupling separated, it was so hot it burned through his work glove and seared his palm. "Damn it," he dropped the piece and clutched his hand. Cool relief flooded through him. Not physical coolness, but something else. Something that soothed the pain and cleared the angry heat from his thoughts. He looked up. Ember had come closer than ever before. She sat just a few feet away, her eyes focused on him with intense concentration. "You are hurt," she said. "I can help a little." "You did that, made the pain less." "Dragons can share feelings through the bond. I gave you calm. It is all I know how to do." Jake felt his throat tighten. "That's not all you can do, that's everything. Thank you, Ember." Something shifted between them in that moment. The connection that had been tentative and fragile grew stronger. Jake could feel it, like a door opening in his mind, and on the other side was Ember, nervous but hopeful. After that night, progress came faster. Ember started eating more. Her scales began to brighten, revealing hints of deep crimson beneath the dull brown. She grew larger, gaining weight and strength. She also started exploring the workshop. Jake would find her examining his tools, sniffing at different materials, testing surfaces with her claws. Once, he caught her trying to pick up a wrench in her mouth. "What are you doing?" he asked, amused. "Watching you work, wanting to understand, wanting to help." "You want to help me fix things?" "Yes, you fix broken things, make them work again. It is beautiful." Jake had never thought of his work as beautiful before. It was just what he did to survive. But seeing it through Ember's eyes made him appreciate it differently. He started showing her things deliberately. How a circuit completed a path for energy to flow. How gears transferred motion. How heat and pressure could be controlled and directed. She absorbed it all with fascination. One afternoon, Lisa Campbell stopped by the workshop. She was a friend, one of the few humans on the station Jake trusted. She ran the supply depot and knew everything about everyone. "So the rumors are true," she said, looking at Ember, who was perched on a shelf. "You actually bought a dragon." "Her name is Ember." Lisa studied the dragon carefully. Ember studied her back, not hiding but clearly uncertain. "She's small," Lisa observed. "She's growing." "Jake, do you know what you're doing? Dragons are not like pets. They bond with people telepathically. If something goes wrong, it could damage both of you." "I know." "Do you? Because the station is talking. People think you're crazy. Some think it's dangerous. Security officer came by my shop asking about you." That made Jake's stomach drop. "What did you tell her?" "The truth, that you're a good man who saw something that needed help and helped it." Lisa's expression softened. "But Jake, you need to be careful. If Ember does anything that seems threatening, we'll separate you. Station rules are clear about exotic creatures." "Ember won't hurt anyone." "I believe you, but others might not be so understanding." After Lisa left, Jake felt worry settle in his chest. He had been so focused on helping Ember that he had not thought about the larger consequences. What if they decided she was too dangerous? What if they took her away? That night, as Ember settled onto her blankets, now much nicer ones Jake had bought, she spoke to him. "The woman was right to worry. I am dangerous. All dragons are. We have fire and claws and strength." "You're not dangerous," Jake insisted. "I could be if I wanted, if I was angry or scared enough." She paused. "But I will never hurt you, Jake. You saved me. You gave me a name. You made me feel like I matter." "You do matter." "Then I promise. I will be good. I will be careful. I will never give them a reason to take me from you." Jake sat beside her and she rested her head on his leg. She was warm now, not the cold creature from the marketplace. Her scales gleamed even in the dim workshop light. "We'll figure it out together," he said. "Whatever comes, we face it together." Ember's mind voice was soft but certain. Together. The weeks passed. Ember continued to grow. She was now the size of a large dog, and her wings had developed enough that she could glide short distances. The asymmetry that had pointed out was barely noticeable. Maybe it had never been as bad as the claimed. Maybe she just needed proper nutrition and care. One evening, Jake was working on a damaged sensor array when Ember suddenly launched herself from her perch. Her wings spread wide, catching air, and for a glorious moment she flew. Then she crashed into a stack of spare parts with a tremendous clatter. Jake rushed over, expecting injury or tears. Instead, Ember was laughing. He had not known dragons could laugh, but the sound that came through their bond was pure joy. "Did you see?" she asked excitedly. I actually flew." Jake laughed too, relief and happiness mixing together. "You did? That was amazing." "I crashed," she admitted. "Everyone crashes the first time. The important thing is you tried." Ember climbed out of the parts pile, her scales now gleaming bright crimson with gold undertones. She looked nothing like the dull, lifeless creature from the marketplace. She looked like what she was meant to be. Magnificent. "Thank you," she said, "not for the first time." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For seeing me when I was invisible." Jake knelt down and looked into her golden eyes. "You were never invisible, Ember. You were just waiting for the right person to look." That night, as they settled in, Jake realized something. He had taken Ember in thinking he was saving her, but in truth, she had saved him too. She had given him purpose beyond just surviving day to day. She had given him family. And he would protect that family no matter what came next. 3 months after Jake brought Ember home, problems began. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a notice delivered to his workshop. Jake read it twice, hoping he had misunderstood. He had not. Frontier Station required permits for exotic creatures, health inspections, proof of proper containment, registration with the Exotic Species Bureau. The fees alone would cost more than Jake made in a month, and that did not include the modifications he would need to make to his workshop. "What does it say?" Ember asked. She was curled on her platform, now strong and healthy, her scales gleaming like polished rubies. "Paperwork, lots of it, and money I don't have." Ember's mind voice grew quiet. "They want to take me away." "No, I'll figure something out." But the next day brought worse news. A ship docked at the station. A large, expensive vessel marked with insignias. They were known across the galaxy as dragon traders. They bred them, sold them, and considered themselves the only species worthy of bonding with dragons. Jake was working on a coolant leak when his door burst open. 3 entered without invitation. They were tall, reptilian beings with silver scales and cold yellow eyes. Their leader wore decorative armor that marked him as someone important. "You are the human who possesses a dragon," the leader said. It was not a question. Jake straightened up, wrench still in hand. "Her name is Ember and I don't possess her. She's my companion." "Impossible. Dragons do not bond with humans. Your kind lacks the telepathic sophistication." Ember emerged from behind a stack of crates. She had grown large enough now that her presence filled the small workshop. She placed herself between Jake and her neck arched, her eyes blazing. "He is mine," she said, her voice ringing not just in Jake's mind but projecting outward. All 3 flinched. "And I am his by choice, by bond, by right of dragon law." The leader recovered quickly, but Jake saw surprise flicker across his face. "I am Merchant Prince. For 3,000 years, my family has bred and trained dragons. We understand them as no other species can. This human has clearly used some trick or technology to force a bond." "Nobody forced anything," Jake said firmly. "Ember was dying in a marketplace cage. I gave her a home, that's all." "You stole what belongs to the people. Dragon bonds are our cultural heritage. We demand she be surrendered to proper authorities immediately." "I belong to no one but myself," Ember growled, smoke curling from her nostrils. "And I choose Jake." His eyes narrowed. "We shall see what the law says about that." They left, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Lisa arrived an hour later, her face grim. "Jake, what did you do?" "They have filed a formal complaint with Station Administrator Wright. They're demanding a hearing." "Let them. Ember chose me. That should be enough." "It might not be. They have influence. They've been trading dragons for. You're just a mechanic who's been with Ember for 3 months." Jake felt Ember's worry through their bond. "What happens at a hearing?" he asked. "They present evidence. You present your case. Administrator Wright decides based on station law and galactic protocols. Jake, you could lose her." That night Jake could not sleep. He researched dragon bonding laws until his eyes burned. Most of what he found was written by scholars. According to them, proper dragon bonding required years of study, specific training, and careful genetic matching. But there were older texts too. Ancient dragon law from before the monopolized the practice. It said something different. It said dragons chose their companions based on compatibility of spirit, not species. It said the bond was sacred and could not be broken by outside force. He shared this with Ember. "Do you think it will help?" she asked. "I don't know, but we have to try." The hearing was scheduled for 1 week later. That week felt like the longest of Jake's life. He continued working, but his heart was not in it. Ember tried to practice her flying, but she was too anxious to focus. Other humans on the station heard what was happening. To their credit, many offered support. Lisa collected character references. Other mechanics vouched for Jake's responsible nature. Even some non-human residents who had seen Ember around the station spoke in her favor. But others were less kind. Jake heard whispers when he walked through the station corridors. Humans always think they can do whatever they want. That dragon is dangerous. He probably used some kind of mind control. Security officer stopped by his workshop one evening. She was a species known for their strict adherence to rules. Her face was hard to read, but her tone was professional. "Mechanic, I need to ask you some questions." "Go ahead." "Has the dragon exhibited any aggressive behavior?" "No, never." "Has she damaged property?" "Only mine, and only by accident when she was learning to fly." "Has she threatened anyone?" "No." "Made notes on her. For the record, I have observed you and the dragon multiple times. I have seen no evidence of danger. However, they have raised concerns about public safety. If the hearing goes against you, I will be required to enforce the administrator's decision." "I understand." After left, Ember spoke quietly. "She is kind in her way, but she will follow orders." "I know. If they take me, I will fight. I will not go willingly." "Ember, no. If you fight, it proves their point that you're dangerous." "I do not care. You are my family. I will not lose you." Jake pulled her close, feeling the warmth of her scales and the steady rhythm of her breathing. "We won't lose each other, I promise." The day of the hearing arrived. The station's assembly hall was packed. More people cared about this case than Jake had realized. Some were curious, some were hostile, a few were genuinely supportive. Administrator Kelvin Wright sat at the head table. He was an older human with gray hair and tired eyes. He had been running Frontier Station for 15 years and had seen stranger things than a mechanic with a dragon. "This hearing will determine the custody of the dragon known as Ember," Wright began. "Merchant Prince of the Trading Collective has filed complaint against Jake, claiming improper bonding and cultural appropriation. Mechanic, you are present to defend your bond. Proceed." Stood first. His presentation was polished and professional. He showed evidence of dragon breeding programs spanning. He presented expert testimony from scholars. He argued that dragons were deeply connected to culture and that allowing other species to bond with them was not just improper but dangerous. "Dragons are powerful creatures," said. "In the wrong hands, they could cause tremendous harm. They have developed careful protocols for bonding. This human has none of that knowledge. He is playing with forces he cannot understand." Then it was Jake's turn. He stood, feeling woefully unprepared compared to slick presentation. He had no fancy visuals or expert witnesses. He just had the truth. "3 months ago, I found Ember in a marketplace cage. She had been there for 3 months before that, rejected by every buyer. The trader said she was flawed, too small, wrong coloring, asymmetrical wings. Nobody wanted her." He pulled up images he had taken that first night. Ember looked terrible in them. Thin, dull-scaled, lifeless. "This is what your careful protocols produced. A dying hatchling that your culture saw as worthless. I'm just a mechanic. I don't know dragon lore or bonding rituals, but I know what it looks like when someone needs help, so I helped." He showed recent pictures. Ember in flight, Ember working with him in the workshop, Ember healthy and strong. "She's not a possession. She's not a status symbol. She's a living being who deserves to choose her own path. And she chose me. Not because I forced her, not because I used tricks, but because I saw her when everyone else looked away." The room was quiet. Jake sat down, his heart pounding. Then Ember did something no one expected. She stood and walked to the center of the room. Dragons rarely spoke telepathically to groups, but she did now. Her voice rang in every mind present. I am Ember, I was nothing, I was broken. I was trash to be discarded, they saw me as defective. Buyers passed me every day. Each rejection hurt more than the last. I thought I would die in that cage. Her voice strengthened. Then Jake stopped. He saw me, not as a prize or a symbol, but as someone who mattered. He gave me a home, he gave me a name, he gave me a reason to live. This bond was not forced. It was chosen by me. She turned to face directly. You claim dragons are part of culture, but you treated me like garbage when I did not meet your standards. Jake treated me like family even when I had nothing to offer. Who truly understands dragons? Those who breed them for profit or those who love them for who they are? The silence that followed was profound. Finally, an elderly in the audience stood. He wore scholar's robes and moved slowly, but his voice was firm. I am Scholar. I have studied dragon lore for 60 years. What this hatchling says is true. We have lost our way. We treat dragons as commodities, not companions. We value perfection over personality. We have forgotten that dragons choose their bonds based on spirit compatibility, not species purity. He looked at, perhaps it is humans who remember what we have forgotten. Perhaps we should be learning from them, not condemning them. Administrator Wright raised his hand for silence. I will take a recess to consider all testimony. We will reconvene in 1 hour for my decision. That hour was agony. Jake and Ember waited outside the hall. Lisa brought them water. Other supporters offered encouraging words. But Jake could only focus on the fear running through his bond with Ember. Whatever happens, he said quietly, thank you for choosing me, for trusting me, for being my family. Always, Ember replied. Finally, they were called back in. Administrator Wright looked tired, but his expression was determined. I have made my decision, he said. The bond between Jake and Ember is legitimate under both dragon law and station regulations. The bond stands. Custody remains with Mechanic. Relief flooded through Jake so strongly, he nearly collapsed. But Wright continued. However, this case has revealed gaps in our regulations regarding exotic creature bonds. Mechanic, you will need to complete proper permitting within 30 days. You will also need to pass a safety inspection. These requirements are not negotiable. I understand, Jake said. Stood fury written across his face. This is outrageous. You set a dangerous precedent. Perhaps, Wright agreed. Or perhaps we open the door to a better way. The hearing is concluded. As people filed out, Jake and Ember stood together, neither quite believing it was over. We won, Ember said wonderingly. We did. But as they walked back to the workshop, Jake noticed watching them with cold eyes. This might be over, but something told him the prince was not finished with them yet. 2 days after the hearing, 3 warships docked at Frontier Station. They came not as merchants but as military representatives, their hulls marked with the symbols of the High Command. Jake was in his workshop, trying to focus on repairing a plasma regulator, when security officer arrived. Mechanic, the military contingent requests your presence in the main assembly hall, immediately. Jake's stomach dropped. What do they want? I do not know, but refusing their request would be unwise. Ember stood from where she had been napping. She was now large enough that her head reached Jake's chest when she stood on all fours. I go with you. That might be what they want, warned. I do not care. Where Jake goes, I go. The assembly hall was different than during the hearing. Instead of curious onlookers, military personnel filled the space. At the center stood a commander in full battle armor, flanked by guards. Jake, the commander said. His voice was deep and carried authority. I am commander of the High Command. Your victory in the custody hearing has created problems. The people demand satisfaction. What kind of satisfaction? Jake asked carefully. A challenge. In our culture, disputes over dragon bonds are settled through trials of skill. You claim the hatchling through legal means. Now prove you are worthy through traditional means. And if I refuse, then by law, you forfeit your claim. The dragon will be taken into proper custody. Ember growled, smoke rising from her nostrils. No one takes me anywhere. Ignored her. The trials consist of 3 tests. First, knowledge. You must demonstrate understanding of dragon nature. Second, skill. You and the dragon must complete a complex task together. Third, bond. The dragon must prove she will defend you of her own choice, not through coercion. Administrator Wright, who had arrived during the explanation, stepped forward. Commander, with respect, mechanic is not bound by tradition. Perhaps not, but the galaxy is watching this situation. If humanity wishes to bond with dragons, they must prove themselves capable. Otherwise, other species will see you as thieves stealing what does not belong to you. Gaze settled on Jake. Do you accept the challenge? Jake looked at Ember. Through their bond, he felt her fear but also her determination. They had come this far together. They would see it through. I accept. You have 1 week to prepare. The trials will be broadcast across the station. All will see whether a human truly deserves a dragon's bond. That week was the hardest of Jake's life. He continued working during the day, but every spare moment went to preparation. Lisa helped him study dragon lore, finding texts in the station's database. Other humans offered advice, though few knew much about dragons. Ember trained relentlessly. She practiced flying through tight spaces, perfecting her flame control and strengthening their telepathic connection. Often, Jake would find her awake in the middle of the night, rehearsing maneuvers. You need to rest, he told her one night. What if I fail? What if I am not good enough? You're more than good enough. We both are. We'll face this together just like everything else. But privately, Jake was terrified. He had learned a lot about dragons in the past months, but compared to scholars who had studied them for lifetimes, his knowledge was shallow. What if he failed? What if they took Ember away? The night before the trials, he could not sleep. He sat in his workshop, running through everything he had learned, trying to memorize facts he might need. Ember settled beside him, her warm presence comforting. You saved me from that cage, she said softly. You gave me life when I had none. Whatever happens tomorrow, I will always be grateful. We're going to win, Jake said with more confidence than he felt. But if we do not, I want you to know, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me feel like I matter. Jake wrapped his arms around her neck, feeling her strong heartbeat and the heat of her scales. You matter more than anything, and I'm not giving you up without a fight. The next morning, the assembly hall was packed beyond capacity. Screens had been set up throughout the station so everyone could watch. They had turned this into a spectacle. The first test began at noon. Jake and Ember stood in the center of the hall while Commander and 2 other scholars sat at a judge's table. The knowledge test, announced. We will ask questions about dragon physiology, psychology, and culture. Mechanic, you must answer correctly or forfeit. The questions started simple. What temperature do dragon flames reach? What minerals do they require in their diet? How long is a typical gestation period? Jake answered carefully, drawing on everything he had studied. Some answers he knew well. Others he had to think through, reasoning from what he understood about Ember. Then the questions grew harder. Complex queries about dragon social structures, ancient bonding rituals, the significance of scale color variations. Jake stumbled on several, but then asked something about the psychological impact of rejection on young dragons. Jake did not know the textbook answer, but he knew Ember's experience. I don't know what the scholarly answer is, he admitted, but I can tell you what I've seen. Rejection hurts dragons deeply. Each time someone looks at them and sees only flaws, it damages their sense of self. Dragons are intelligent and emotional. They understand when they're unwanted and it breaks something inside them. The only cure is acceptance. Real acceptance, not just tolerance. The hall was quiet, studied him for a long moment. That answer is not found in any text. No, it's found in living with someone and caring about them. One of the other scholars, an elderly female, nodded slowly. Sometimes life teaches what books cannot. That answer is acceptable. The knowledge test concluded. Jake had not answered every question perfectly, but he had answered honestly. Test 1 is complete, announced. Mechanic demonstrates adequate knowledge. We proceed to the skill test. The skill test was held in one of the station's large cargo bays. They had constructed an obstacle course that would challenge both dragon and companion. Narrow passages, vertical climbs, moving platforms, and at the end, a small object that had to be retrieved from a high tower and returned intact. You have 15 minutes, said. Any bonded pair can complete this course in 20. If humans are truly compatible with dragons, you should manage as well. Jake looked at the course. It seemed impossible, but Ember nuzzled his shoulder. We can do this, she said. I fly, you think, together we are strong. Together, Jake agreed. They started. The first section required navigating a maze of narrow passages. Ember was too large to fit through some, but Jake could squeeze through and guide her around. She called out what she could see from above while he found the path below. The second section was a wall that had to be climbed. Jake started up, using handholds, but halfway up he got stuck. Ember flew up beside him, positioning herself so he could use her back as a stepping stone. They moved as one unit, each supporting the other. The moving platforms nearly defeated them. They swayed and shifted, requiring perfect timing. Jake ran across while Ember flew overhead, her telepathic guidance helping him know when to jump. Finally, the tower. It was too tall for Jake to climb alone and too narrow for Ember to fit inside. But together they found a solution. Ember flew him to a high window. He climbed inside, retrieved the object, a delicate crystal sphere, and carefully climbed back out. Ember caught him and they descended together. When they crossed the finish line, Jake checked his watch. 13 minutes. The crowd erupted in noise. Some cheered, some protested, but they had done it. Commander's expression was unreadable. Test 2 is complete. You have demonstrated skill. We proceed to the final test. The bond test was the most dangerous. Ember had to face a simulated threat while Jake was placed in apparent danger. The test measured whether the dragon would abandon their companion to save themselves. They were led to separate areas of the cargo bay. Jake was placed in a chamber with clear walls so Ember could see him. She stood in the open space, her wings spread, ready for whatever came. Holographic projectors activated. A massive predator materialized, something with too many teeth and eyes that glowed red. It was not real, but the simulation was convincing enough that Jake's heart raced. The creature attacked Ember. She dodged, her movements fast and precise. She could easily fly away, escape through the open bay doors. That was what the test expected. Most dragons, when given a choice between their own safety and their companions, chose themselves. Then the simulation changed. The creature turned toward Jake's chamber. It raised a massive claw as if to strike the clear wall. Ember did not hesitate. She launched herself between the predator and Jake, roaring defiance. Her flames engulfed the hologram. When it did not fall, she attacked with claws and teeth, fighting with everything she had. Enough, commanded. The simulation vanished. Ember stood panting, her scales scorched in places from her own flames, her eyes wild. She looked at Jake, and relief flooded their bond. "You are safe?" she asked. "I'm safe, you were amazing." Stepped forward, his expression had changed. There was something like respect in his eyes. In 300 years of administering this test, I have never seen a dragon respond so quickly. Most hesitate, some flee. You did not even pause. "He is my family," Ember said simply. I would die before I let harm come to him." The commander looked at Jake, then back at Ember. "You have passed all 3 tests. By law, your bond is proven legitimate." The crowd erupted again, this time with more cheers than protests, but raised a hand for silence. "However, I must speak truth. This victory will have consequences. You have proven that humans can bond with dragons as well as, better, even in some ways. This changes the galaxy's understanding of dragon bonds. Many will celebrate this. Many will resent it." "I don't care about changing the galaxy," Jake said. "I just care about protecting my family." Noble but naive. Word of this will spread. Others will attempt what you have done. Some will succeed, some will fail. You have started something mechanic, whether you intended to or not. As they walked back to the workshop, exhausted but victorious, Jake felt the weight of words. He had just wanted to help one small dragon, but somehow that simple act had become something bigger. "Do you regret it?" Ember asked quietly. "Taking me in, knowing it would cause all this trouble?" Jake pulled her close. "Never, not for a second." "Good, because I do not regret choosing you either." They had won. They had proven their bond. But as Jake looked at the crowd still talking about what they had witnessed, he wondered what challenges tomorrow would bring. News of Jake and Ember's victory spread through the galaxy faster than light-speed communications could carry it. Within days, Frontier Station was flooded with messages, visitors, and attention that Jake had never wanted. Scientists requested permission to study their bond. Media outlets offered ridiculous amounts of money for exclusive interviews. Most significantly, other humans began arriving at the station with questions. Could they bond with dragons too? What about other exotic creatures? Jake tried to ignore it all and focus on work. But work was becoming difficult. People constantly interrupted to ask about Ember. Some were genuinely curious. Others were skeptics looking for proof that the whole thing was fake. One morning, Lisa arrived at his workshop carrying a small bundle wrapped in blankets. "Jake, you need to see this." She carefully unwrapped the blanket to reveal a wolf pup. But this was no ordinary wolf. Its fur was made of crystalline structures that caught the light and split it into rainbows. It was beautiful and clearly in pain. "This is a crystal wolf from, they're incredibly rare. This pup was sold to a collector who realized it has a defective leg. It can't walk properly, so they abandoned it in a shipping container. Station security found it yesterday." The pup whimpered, looking up at Jake with eyes full of suffering and confusion. "Why are you bringing it to me?" Jake asked, though he already knew the answer. "Because everyone knows what you did for Ember. They're saying if anyone can help this pup, it's you. I already have 3 other humans asking me about taking in creatures their original owners rejected." Jake looked at the wolf pup, then at Ember, who had come over to investigate. She sniffed the pup gently, and Jake felt understanding flow through their bond. "We have to help," Ember said. "We know what it feels like to be unwanted. I can barely handle one exotic creature, let alone more. You are not alone anymore. I can help. We can help." Lisa set the pup down carefully. It tried to stand, but its left leg gave out. "I'll understand if you say no, Jake. This is a lot to ask." Jake knelt beside the pup. It looked at him with desperate hope, the same way Ember had looked at him in that marketplace cage. He was just a mechanic. He was not qualified for this. But then again, he had not been qualified to raise a dragon either, and Ember was thriving. "Do you have any idea what crystal wolves eat?" he asked. Lisa smiled. "I'll find out." Over the next week, 2 more humans showed up. One had found a telepathic fox kit that was too emotionally sensitive for its previous owner. Another had rescued a phase spider hatchling that could partially shift between dimensions, but was too small to be valuable. The 4 humans met in Jake's now crowded workshop. Besides Jake, there was Greg Hunt, a cargo hauler who had taken in the fox. There was Jordan, a botanist who had the spider, And there was Peter Collins, a young tech specialist who had adopted the crystal wolf. "This is getting out of hand," Greg said, though his fox Kit was curled contentedly in his lap. "We all just wanted to help, but now what? We can't keep doing this informally." "He's right," agreed. "We need structure, resources, legal protection." Lisa, who had joined the meeting, pulled up some documents on her. "I've been looking into this. What you need is to form an official organization, a sanctuary for unwanted exotic creatures. With proper registration, you could get funding, legal status, and protection from people who might try to take your companions away." "A sanctuary," Jake repeated. "That sounds bigger than what we're doing." "It is bigger, that's the point. Word is spreading, Jake. Your victory with Ember inspired people. Humans are finding creatures that other species rejected and giving them homes. But without organization, some will fail. Some will get hurt. We need to do this properly." Peter, the youngest of the group, leaned forward. "I like it. The Frontier Sanctuary, a place where the unwanted become valued." "It would mean a lot of work," Jake warned. "Paperwork, regulations, inspections." "You've already dealt with all that," Greg pointed out. "You fought the N1. If anyone can navigate the bureaucracy, it's you." Through his bond, Jake felt Ember's encouragement. "This is right. This is what we were meant to do." "All right," Jake said finally. "Let's do it, the Frontier Sanctuary." They filed the papers that week. Administrator Wright, who had become an unlikely ally, helped expedite the approval process. Within a month, the Frontier Sanctuary was official. But not everyone was pleased. A group of smugglers and exotic creature traders saw the sanctuary as a direct threat to their business. If unwanted creatures could find homes for free, it cut into their profit margins. They began spreading rumors that the bonded creatures were dangerous, that humans were mind-controlling them, that disaster was inevitable. Then the threats became real. It was late at night when Jake's security alarm went off. He woke instantly, reaching for Ember through their bond. She was already awake, her senses picking up what he could not. "Intruders," she said, "many of them armed." Jake activated the workshop's comm system. We have a breach at the sanctuary location." Security officer's voice came back immediately. "Stay inside. We're on our way." But the intruders were not waiting. Jake heard cutting tools working on the bay doors. They were coming in through the weak points, trying to grab the creatures and run before security arrived. "We fight," Ember said, her voice hard with determination. "Ember, no. If you hurt someone, even in self-defense, they'll use it against us." "Then I do not hurt them, I scare them." Before Jake could stop her, Ember moved to the center of the workshop. She had grown huge in the months since Jake found her. Her wingspan now stretched nearly 20 feet, and her scales gleamed like polished rubies in the emergency lighting. The bay doors burst open. 5 figures in dark clothing rushed in, carrying stun weapons and cages. They froze when they saw Ember. She reared up on her hind legs, spreading her wings to their full extent. Then she roared. The sound shook the walls and echoed through the station corridors. Fire erupted from her mouth, not aimed at the intruders but at the ceiling, creating a wall of flame between them and the other creatures. The smugglers stumbled backward, their confidence shattered. "You want them," Ember's telepathic voice rang in every mind present. "You go through me first." The other bonded creatures joined her. Greg's telepathic fox projected waves of fear into the intruders' minds. Faye's spider flickered in and out of dimensions, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. Peter's crystal wolf, despite its bad leg, positioned itself protectively, its crystalline fur reflecting light in disorienting patterns. And their human companion stood with them, armed with whatever tools were at hand, ready to defend their family. Security arrived minutes later, led by Officer. The smugglers surrendered without further fight. They were broken by creatures they had thought would be easy prey. surveyed the scene, her expression unreadable. Then she looked at Jake and nodded once, a gesture of respect. "No one was hurt?" she asked. "No one." "Good, these criminals will be processed. But Mechanic, you should know, this will not be the last attempt. You have made enemies." "I know, but we also made something worth protecting." The attempted theft made galactic news. The images of Ember and the other creatures defending their home, working together with their human companions, spread across every major network. Public opinion shifted dramatically. The Galactic Council took notice. A delegation arrived at Frontier Station to meet with Jake and the other sanctuary founders. To everyone's surprise, one of the delegates was Scholar, the elderly who had spoken in favor of Jake during the hearing. "The council has reviewed your sanctuary proposal," said. "We are impressed by what you have achieved. Humans have demonstrated a unique ability to bond with creatures other species have failed with. The council wishes to grant official recognition and funding to the Frontier Sanctuary." Jake was stunned. "Why, I thought most species would be against this." "Some are, but many see the value. You have proven that the rejected can thrive with proper care. This benefits the galaxy. Fewer abandoned creatures, fewer desperate animals causing problems. And perhaps most importantly, you have shown that bonds based on compassion are stronger than bonds based on status or profit." The funding changed everything. They could expand beyond Jake's cramped workshop. They rented a large section of the station, creating proper living spaces for different creatures. They hired staff, including veterinarians and specialists in exotic creature care. More humans arrived, inspired by what they had seen. More creatures found homes. The sanctuary became known across the frontier as a place where the unwanted could find value. Jake often found himself back at the marketplace where he had first found Ember. But now he walked with purpose, looking for creatures in cages, creatures that others had overlooked. One evening, 6 months after founding the sanctuary, he stood before a familiar stall. The trader who had sold him Ember was still there. Mechanic greeted him, his tone considerably more respectful than their first meeting. "Come to judge me for my past sins." "No, I came to see if you have any creatures that need help." Gestured to his mostly empty stalls. "Business has been bad since you started your sanctuary. People would rather adopt unwanted creatures than buy expensive ones, but perhaps that is how it should be." He led Jake to a small cage in the back. Inside was a tiny creature that Jake did not recognize, some kind of scaled mammal hybrid with too many legs. "What's wrong with it?" Jake asked. "It is a hybrid, genetic experiment that did not turn out as planned. The lab that created it wants nothing to do with it. It is not valuable, not rare, not remarkable. It is simply alive and unwanted." The creature looked up at Jake with large, frightened eyes. Jake felt a familiar tug in his chest. "How much?" Back at the sanctuary, which was now a proper facility with multiple sections and 24 creatures, Ember greeted him at the door. She was magnificent now, fully grown, her scales brilliant, her wings powerful. "Another one?" she asked, amusement in her mental voice. "I can't help it when I see them. I know, I was one of them once." They walked through the sanctuary together. Humans and creatures of all kinds moved about. Some were permanent residents, bonded with their companions. Others were temporary, being cared for until they could be matched with the right person. In the main hall, Peter was teaching a class on creature psychology to new humans who wanted to adopt, was researching better nutrition for crystalline creatures. Greg was coordinating with other stations across the frontier who wanted to start their own sanctuaries. "We did this," Ember said quietly. "We changed things." "You did this," Jake corrected. "You were brave enough to reach out to a stranger in a marketplace. Everything else followed from that." "No, you were brave enough to see me, to see value where others saw only flaws." Jake thought back to that first night, sitting in his cramped workshop with a dying dragon hatchling, wondering what he had gotten himself into. He never could have imagined it would lead to this. A movement, a community, a family. Lisa found them in the main hall. "Jake, we just got a call from a station 3 sectors away. They found a whole group of abandoned creatures in a smuggler's ship. Can we take them?" Jake looked at Ember, who looked back with those golden eyes that had first captured his heart. "We have room," Ember said. "We have room," Jake agreed. That night, after the new creatures had been settled and the sanctuary had finally quieted down, Jake sat in what used to be his workshop but was now his office. Through the window, he could see Ember resting on her platform, the other creatures scattered around the main hall, all safe, all cared for. He pulled up his personal log and began to write. "6 months ago, I saved a dragon from a marketplace cage. Or maybe she saved me. It's hard to say anymore. What I know is this: the galaxy is full of creatures that someone somewhere decided were not good enough. Too small, wrong color, damaged, flawed, but those flaws do not define them. Given a chance, given care, given love, they become extraordinary. Ember taught me that. And now we're teaching it to others. This is what humanity can offer the galaxy. Not the best technology or the strongest military, but the willingness to see value where others see nothing, the capacity to love the unloved. That is our gift, and I am honored to give it." He closed the log and walked back into the main hall. Ember stirred as he approached. "Cannot sleep?" she asked. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About a small dragon in a cage who whispered that nobody wanted her. About a mechanic who was foolish enough to care." Ember moved her head close to his, and Jake felt the warmth of her breath and the strength of their bond, unbreakable and absolute. "Not foolish," she said. "Brave. You saw me when I was invisible. You believed in me when I could not believe in myself. You gave me everything. You gave me just as much. You gave me purpose. You gave me family. You taught me that fixing broken things is not just about engines and ships. Sometimes it's about hearts. Thank you, Jake, for that first moment in the marketplace, for every moment since. Thank you, Ember, for choosing me, for trusting me, for becoming my family." They sat together in the quiet sanctuary, surrounded by other rescued creatures, all sleeping peacefully. Outside, the station hummed with life. And somewhere out there, in some marketplace on some station, another creature waited in a cage, hoping someone would see them. And because of what Jake and Ember started, someone would. Someone always would. The unwanted would never be alone again.